17th. I cannot think of anything else, Hans. In my waking and sleeping dreams, I see his fall over and over. I see his head hitting the rock, and his oh so pale face softening. I have taken refuge in the attic. It is the only place where I find any peace, wrapped up in all my memories. 18th. 5 days have passed since the accident, and Sans has still not opened his eyes. To see him like this is unbearable. Please, God, protect him. Take my life, not his. 19th. I feel so desperate, so alone. I want to snuggle up in father's arms, but I dare not. He is so impassive. Oh, Hans, don't leave me here. 20th. It has happened. Hans has come back to life. He opened his eyes and uttered my name. My name! Do you realize? This is the happiest day of my life. I want to take to the streets and sing. To proclaim my joy to the world. Thank you. Oh, thank you. 22nd. The 22nd. That's incorrect. That's not right. That bothers me. Fix that. ND, please. Thank you. How wonderful, how beautiful life is. Gertrude and I cannot stop breaking into uncontrollable fits of giggles. Hans even wolfed down his meal today. I knew he was tough, my little brother. Even father smiled at me today when he said good morning. 25th. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I'm totally absorbed in Hans' recovery. I have scarcely 5 minutes to myself to return to my refuge and scribble down these words. 29th. This is 4 days after this. It is very curious. Whether Hans is hungry, thirsty, or if he wants something, he cannot stop saying my name. He cannot bear it when I leave him, even for an instant. Gertrude thinks that I should move my bed into his room to help him sleep better. I hope that father will agree. June 2nd. Today was the first day that Hans has left the house. We went for a short walk in the garden, but Hans is still very weak. The doctor said we should be patient and shouldn't rush him. It is so hard, though. I hope so much that life can return to how it once was. Whew, keeps going. 20th. Hans has been out of his coma for a month now. Oh, 20th, yeah, big jump. He still doesn't say much and has difficulty moving. He sits motionless for long periods of time, his eyes wide open as though lost in thought. I have often had to call his name several times before he reacts. Then he will smile, and when he does, the moment is magic for me, and I couldn't possibly be happier. 22nd. I had to talk to him. The burden was too great. I asked Hans about the accident in the cave to find out what he could remember. He could utter only one word, mammoth, and his eyes glowed so strangely when he said it that he frightened me. Big jump to September. I go back to school today, and for the first time in my life, I am dreading it. I am afraid of leaving Hans alone. Despite Gertrude's kindness and attention, I have the impression that Hans is much less nervous when I'm there. October. While I was doing my homework yesterday evening, Hans crept up on me quietly that he made me jump. He took a pencil and blank sheet of paper, and curiously, he started drawing. It is the first time since his accident he has done anything but daydream. 28th. Hans scribbles almost obsessively. It is all he will do, all day long. I feel it annoys father. Nobody else understands, but I can see that Hans is trying to draw mammoths. 16th. Today is my birthday, and Gertrude has made me an apple pie, my favorite. But father has not returned home for lunch, and Hans doesn't want to leave his room. The best present I could ever have is to see Hans back in the road to recovery. Christmas. Snow is falling. It is so beautiful. January 10th. The doctor visited to examine Hans. He seems happy that my little brother has fully recovered his faculties. It is truly a miracle. I don't understand why he doesn't talk more, though. Why isn't he livelier like he was before? It is Hans's birthday. Today he is 11 years old. I have the strangest impressions that actually he has lost 5 years rather than gained one more. Whew. Lordy, lordy. February 24th. The doctor has just left. I saw him whispering with father. Their serious expressions worried me awfully. What could they be hiding from me? I'm grown up now, at the age of... Oh, yeah. At the age of 15, you can understand everything. I am too scared to ask father what is happening. March 15th. I have been thinking, and it seems to me that Hans's attitude isn't normal. The shock of the fall and his coma must have had much more serious effects than we first imagined. Hans, my dear brother, what is happening to you? April 4th. I've discovered the truth. Hans is stunted physically and mentally. I eavesdropped a conversation between the doctor, father, and Gertrude. Gertrude buried her tear-filled eyes in her apron, and father muttered the word retard under his breath. How could he say such a thing? April 13th. It is Easter, and we're on school holidays. This means I can spend all day with Hans and protect him from father's permanent dark moods. He cannot accept the fact that Hans, his only son, will stay in this state forever. 14th. It is truly difficult to accept, but it is not Hans' fault. Maybe Mine maybe, but not Hans. I don't know how to make Father understand. He seems full of hatred for him. It is dreadful. I feel so powerless. Whew. How much more? Oh boy. Jesus Christ. Okay, I can't read this whole thing out loud, but I have to read this. Father's decided to take Hans to Paris for a new test, because I feel like this is the whole story. This is important, so I will read it out loud, but it's going to take a long time. A long-ass time. And I'm sorry. 1 year. 1 year has gone by and it feels like an eternity. The situation shows no signs of improvement, neither in terms of Hans' mental health or Father's attitude toward him. Extraordinary Father has decided to take Hans to Paris for new tests. He says that only in the French capital will he find truly competent doctors. We must make Hans ready for the great expedition. No news from Father and Hans, but I remain hopeful. I am sure they will take good care of my little brother. They have returned. Hans rushed to my arms and started crying. It took me a long time to calm him down and get him to sleep. Father is still as taciturn as he was before. The French doctors have confirmed the diagnosis. Hans will remain physically and mentally impaired. I am stunned. Summer is coming to a close. It has been stifling, less stifling than the last. The sun has been put color on Hans's cheeks. While I look at him, I have difficulty imagining that he will not change. Father still says nothing and increasingly shuts himself away in his office at the factory. Gertrude tells me that a love and faith triumph over any science. I lack neither. God be praised. Father took Hans to the factory this morning. Hans was so afraid that I accompanied them. Fortunately, Father said nothing. I fail to understand why he insisted on bringing him there. Father left for the factory with Hans once again this morning. I think he wants to persuade Hans that he could be useful for something. It is his way of resisting fate. For a month now, every morning, Hans has gone to work with Father at the factory. I'm not exactly sure what he does there, but he seems to enjoy it. I feel my brother's behavior has changed considerably. He is much less capricious. I could cry. Hans has made me a present, a small robot mammoth with a trunk that rises and falls. When Father saw it, he nodded his head in satisfaction. Both Gertrude and Father now have their own robot mammoths. Theirs are even more intricate and finely tuned. Little brother is not such a retard after all. Hans' mammoths now walk, raise their trunks, and wag their tails. It's incredible. I met the head of the factory workshop, Mr. Grips, this morning. He says that for a young lad of 12, Hans is very gifted. It is a shame he only makes elephants. Father and Hans were locked in a long discussion yesterday, or should I say Hans was locked in one of Father's long monologues, as it is inconceivable that Hans should go to school like other children. Father wants to take him on as a worker at the factory. However, Hans will have stopped making his own little devices. Hans's silence, his half-gaping mouth and staring eyes finally sent Father off in a rage. Oops, shit. Shit. No. Yeah. No. Come on. Almost there. I tried to broach the subject with Hans. I suggested he should obey Father. Learning a craft at the factory is his one last chance to do something constructive with his life. He is so gifted and takes so much pleasure in making automatons. He did look like he wasn't listening to me. But I knew he'll think about what I said. It's not that Hans cannot speak, it's rather that he doesn't want to speak. He uses the least possible words for communication, except with me, but he's still very economical with words. Incredible, Hans was not just satisfied with learning how the assembly line works. Instead, he has completely redesigned it. Father and Monsieur Grips are taking serious looks at his plans. July 10th, Father has wanted to talk to me about my future. Since I passed my exams, he wants to send me to university because he says my intelligence is astounding. My heart was beating so loud. It is true I do love studying, but I couldn't bear to be away from Hans. What a ghastly summer. I have been permanently torn between my desire to go to university and my refusal to leave my brother. I talked about it with Hans, but he said nothing. That same evening, I found my own little mammoth broken. Well, that's kind of sad. I guess Hans was jealous, protective of his sister, didn't want to leave. Hans had another fit of hysterics at dinner again. Father announced that Hans' new assembly line would soon be finished. However, they have removed the automaton parrots that shout orders as they were deemed superfluous. Hans was livid. He hurled his soup dish to the ground and stormed off to his bedroom. What will happen between both of them when I'm not here? Despite my scruples, I'm finally leaving. Hans has not talked to me for a week. Father would not understand if I told him why I wanted to stay. My heart is so heavy. Christmas. It is so strange to be home. I had never left home for such a long time before. Once we were alone, Hans did not stop talking. Words just leapt from his mouth. How he laughed at his excitement. He presented me with a delightful little ballerina to replace the mammoth. He told me I was so touched that I started crying. Distance has done nothing to harm the strong bond between us. Ooh, big jump here. 33, Christmas, 37. It is so strange to pick up this diary once more. At first my impulse was to tear it up, but I resisted and instead succumbed to my second desire, which was to write for a while. I'm alone in my attic once more. I have been home for 2 months now, and after a summer spent living with the intense joy of being reunited with my brother, Hans has returned to the factory. Father has aged though, and Gertrude's arthritis causes her terrible pain. Sorry, Gertrude. That's tough. All in all, these last 4 years have been kind to Father and Hans. Their relationship is less tense. They still do not exchange much conversation, but they now have a thing in common, the factory. I'm even beginning to feel a bit jealous. Silly, really. Hans hasn't changed. To help Gertrude, he has designed a totally automated kitchen, and Gertrude can't stop moaning at the wooden puppets. Oh, how I adore them. Come on, almost done, right? God. I gotta read this whole thing. I gotta have it on record. I'm sorry, I just have to do it. Because I have to read it anyway. I went to go and see Father and Hans at work. I hadn't been to the factory for ages. It is so strange how much it has changed. I was very curious to see them set about their tasks. I like Father's new office very much. Hans has a small workshop on the first floor, crammed with odds and ends, unfinished robots and designs exactly as I imagined. October 37. The factory is working very well. Ugh. Orders for toys keep coming in, spurred on by the run-up to Christmas. When I was at university and I said my name was Vorarlberg, people would ask me if I had any relation to the Valladolid factory. Now I know the effect that Hans' genius has had on the factory's renown. To make myself useful, I started helping Father set his papers in order. The most extraordinary thing of all is that for the first time ever, I have the impression that the three of us form a real family. And then it all comes crashing down for poor Anna. Poor Anna. Hans never ceases to surprise me. Between home and his factory, his behavior is so very different. In his workshop, he is serious, concentrated, a proper young man who keeps his eye on everything going on, constantly on the move and in control. One has the impression that each single toy is his very own infant. At home, he turns back into a child once more and is either moody or a happy-go-lucky buffoon. Another Christmas, the most wonderful Christmas of my whole life. Hans and I could not stop giggling like children beneath Father's disapproving glare. I know that he was only pretending, really. Our hearts are so full of hope. January 5th. Hans came to see me in my bedroom yesterday evening. I felt terribly awkward, terribly ill at ease. I might have guessed. Hans wants to leave Valladolid. The house and the factory. He wants to go traveling. He doesn't know where to go or for how long. That's just like him. I was so shocked that I told him his plans were foolish. He left my bedroom without a word, his head bowed. Yeah, I have to get to the part where Hans dies. Or, Hans dies. I want her impression of that event, of the death. So let's see. I thought that he wanted to leave because of Father. Not at all. It's because of the mammoths. He wants to go tracking mammoths. I thought he had gotten over his obsession. I know my brother only too well. I wouldn't dream of telling him his quest is useless. It isn't worth it. He will not listen to reason. I was so selfish the other evening. I returned to talk to Hans and asked him gently if he was sure of his decision. I already know what the reply is going to be. Nothing will make him change his mind. Despite my profound sadness and despair, I must help Hans fulfill the destiny he has chosen and announce the news to Father. I fear the worst. The worst was worse than my fears. Father's anger was terrifying. He shut Hans away in his workshop at the factory and has forbidden all visits